Hello, everybody, and welcome to the first episode of the all-new Reads. Please think if you like what you see here, please go ahead and hit the subscribe button and hit that bell for that notification so you can always be set up by. You also can follow us over on Blue Sky at Ryan7Read and on Mastodon at Ryan7Read. And we're also available if you would like to listen to us also on Instagram. Also, if you noticed right here, we have our setup here for our Patreon. If you join our Patreon at the Pixel Classroom, you can set up your reward that works best from you. You can set up from bronze, silver, gold, and ruby. The Patreon page is everything from early releases, private shows, to tutorials, especially in the educational business, as well as upcoming personal one-on-one reviews, as well as guest Q&A. You can pick up your levels from bronze, silver, gold, ruby, and the store will be opening up soon today. Our first episode here doing that, of course, will be the most recently releases here from the Energon Universe from the G.I. Joe series. We will look at, of course, Scarlett #1 by Kelly Thompson and art by Marco Ferrari. And, of course, we will be looking at the amazing Destro #1 by Dan Waters and Andrei Bressan. On that note, everybody, I am Ryan Reed, your host for the Pixel Classroom podcast network, and this of course is Reads. So I started Reads before we get into the little parts on here too. I started Reads about almost 20 years ago. I did a review as my part-time work on our area for that, and they basically became a little part here where I would do the weekly comic reviews. Eventually those kind of came to a small little part here, which of course eventually, as many people have seen me on the networks, is of course Spider-Man crawlspace.com, where you can find me doing my Spider-Man reviews for both the main series, various miniseries, as well as Ultimate Spider-Man. But we're going to go, of course, do different today too, and we're going to go right into these new reviews. This will be part of the new podcast areas too, as you know, as part of the Pixel Classroom Network, as I said today, as we're going to go ahead and review these amazing books from the Energon Universe here. And of course, we're going to be working on those right here with our little presentation here on my reviews here set. We're going to go ahead and go through these one at a time. I'm going to talk about the setup of the series. And then, of course, I'll do my pros and cons of each series, and we will go from there. So let us get in. Those who are on the visual ones can see my new comic reviews, Reads area here too. So we're going to go ahead and get this set up into review set area here. Pretty amazing, huh? But you know what? Also, I think we need to set this back up on my main part, which is there it is, all ready to go. My little view screen ready to go. So with more further ado, let's go ahead and review Scarlett #1. Which is written by Kelly Thompson and art by Marco Ferrari, which was released of June 16th, 2024. If you earlier copy, great. Me, I didn't receive mine until June 16th. So henceforth, that's why that is there. So let us go ahead and get this off the brawl. So how does issue 1 of Scarlett start off? Well, first of all, we get into a little location here in Monaco, where, of course, Shauna O'Hara, better known as codename Scarlett, of course, is getting set up to infiltrate in a mission. She goes ahead and sets up in a position where she is to look for certain hostages, but she is actually looking for a different type of trafficking network. So she goes in through the area too, as she contacts her main area with finding out who the buyers are for the different members of Girl. However, things get a little kind of off when not only during the mission, she finds her old partner and roommate, Jinx. Of course, Jinx is, of course, got the main symbols on and everything else. And we get to an area here where, of course, all hell breaks loose as, of course, Jinx ends up rescuing several of the hostages, which causes Scarlett to, of course, get into the fight here, which she was told not to engage. And, of course, she ends up getting into a fight. And, of course, using her wonderful crossbow area ends up helping Jinx escape, as well as taking areas for, of course, extraction, as of course the hostages that were set up have been free because of the little tiff battle. Well, this doesn't work so well for Shauna. She, of course, has to meet with her superior in Washington, D.C., and of course ends up explaining how she couldn't sit there with about the different families and finding out about what had happened. And of course, as a result, she, of course, is knocked off of her assignment, the general, and of course she is kicked off. She was set up for renewal, and because of this insubordination and a few other things, she ends up basically being fired. So as a result, Sergeant O'Hara, which is what her real ranking is, ends up going ahead admin after losing her position by General Gorman. And of course, she gets to her home and finds out that the tripwire setup has, of course, been knocked over. She knows it's not Jinx or anybody else because they broke the tape and they would have known better. And who would show up but our good old buddy Stalker, one of my favorite G.I. Joe members here, as he always says here, once a spy, always a spy. And of course, as we get to find out, Stalker is talking about trying to figure out what happened to Jinx. Doing some flashbacks, we find out how basically Scarlett and Jinx, of course, worked as friends as well as teammates. And of course, we find out from Stalker that what had happened is originally Jinx was supposed to be infiltrating, of course, Clan Ashirika, which, of course, as you know, which is a high-end ninja assassin cult that's been working with a lot of terrorist organization. Of course, Jinx ended up disappearing off the radar. And now, of course, Stalker wants to find out what happened to her and find out if she can be extracted. So, believe it or not, he sets her up with, of course, her old buddy Snow Job. Remember our favorite red-haired, bearded G.I. Joe snow trooper here. So, of course, he ends up talking a little bit about the flashback, how they met on vacation and helped them for here. Drops, of course, her in the middle of Japan in the high mountains. It's where she immediately, of course, runs into the member of the classic assassins of the ninjas. And, of course, actually ends up defeating pretty much all of them. They end up beating her here. And, of course, as a result, she actually goes to the clan's leader, which is, of course, the Hard Master, who is sitting with one of his other senseis. And, of course, who else is there but none other than Jinx. Of course, she talks that, of course, after the men and everything, they offer him a deal since, of course, since after all, she just defeated almost all of the guardsmen to get to him. However, he doesn't really find this deal very good. And what ends up happening is she is knocked unconscious by Storm Shadow. And so ends the issue of Scarlett #1. So how I like to review these two, I like to go through the pros and cons, but I also like to stack then who are these people. So #1 is, who are Stalker and Snow Job? Well, Snow Job, which of course from the original cartoon, he of course showed the original G.I. Joe Real American Hero toy line from the original Mass Effect. So his real name, of course, is Harlan Moore. He's originally from Vermont. He of course was a pronunciation, and he was signed up for Olympic biathlon and eventually joined the military and became a co-ops person there. So that is Snow Job's part. And of course, Stalker, like I said, one of my favorite G.I. Joe members who, sad to say, in the original cartoon, he is very prevalent in the original movie, but he kind of got lost to get into the season 3 from Deke, which worked in for Slaughter's Marauders, where he was brought in. But G.I. Joe, Stalker is a ranger. His real name is Lorenzo Wilkinson. He is actually a special arts E9 sergeant major. He originally was from Detroit, and he's a select area because of his primary specialty on that. So those are who Snow Job and Stalker are. Not Stalker. I love it when I do that. Anywhoosies. So what about our buddy Jinx? Well, Jinx is a favorite of mine. So Jinx, so of course, as we find out, is not only Scarlett's old friend, but actually used to be her roommate and everything. So her real name, of course, is Kim Arashagan. Very interesting. The Clan Arashagan, that's her last name. Interesting, huh? Well, she is actually in a grade rank in the military. She was actually a Sergeant E5 grade. She was originally a finance clerk, believe it or not, in the military. Very interesting little thing, too. We did not meet her until G.I. Joe, the movie, back in 1987, where she had a romantic relationship with Lieutenant Falcon. But she was, of course, trained as a highly thing on Snake Eyes and Storm Shadow, as well as members of the Blind Master, who was not introduced in this storyline. We get a really wonderful, cool little things about her in this story that I really, really enjoyed about with Jinx. Is I love the seeing the partners. They actually created this little like code language with them. Like I said, it's not something they can translate or anything. It's based on how they knew each other and their friendship. And I really like the little clues that were going on here with Jinx. And I really get to see her really kick some butt when she's taking the hostages and she's running free. And of course, when Scarlett saves her. So I was really, really getting a really kick pot out of that. I really, really enjoyed that of the story on that. And if I can move on to my other side screen here. Hold on a second, guys. Having a little problem here. That's why we do edits. And there it goes. There it goes. It's almost there. So anyhow, let's get over to that next screen here. So there we go. Move over, and there we go. And if I get past Jinx, so who exactly is the Hard Master? Now, this is what I had to do a little bit piece too. Some people don't really know much about the Hard Master. He's been actually a long time G.I. Joe character. Of course, as you know, he's the head of the Molson clan, so that's where he is. Basically, from what we know, he was basically the high sensei trainer. He's actually the person who, of course, named Snake Eyes, because believe it or not, Snake Eyes and Shadow are his nephews in the original piece. We don't know what that is in the current Energon universe here, but he's a very high area thing. He basically is what happens is he was eventually killed, and what leads to Storm Shadow joining Cobra originally, and actually led to the breakup of the Yashikin clan as a result. Jinx, of course, went for G.I. Joe, as well as other members. Snake Eye, of course, there too after he was gone. In the movie, of course, that continuity stated that Zartan assassinated him in the original G.I. Joe movies here, but the Hard Master is a long letter of this, and basically his nephew is Storm Shadow, and of course everything else with Snake Eyes. Of course, we haven't met Snake Eyes yet, but we do meet Storm Shadow in this first area here. Our good old buddy, he's actually one of my favorite Cobra members. He was originally introduced in the cartoon of Revenge of Cobra back in 1984. His real name is, of course, Thomas Ashokin, better as Tommy. Believe it or not, he is originally an American-born citizen, but he is a very high-end strike ninja force area too. So he was parts, because basically when the clan died, that's what led Storm Shadow to joining Cobra in the original continuity. Later on, he actually switched sides due to the fact of finding out that the Hard Master was set up to be assassinated by Cobra. He had been working and basically had broken his oath to the guard, and he eventually joined G.I. Joe as a member. He is very prevalent actually in season 4 of the original animation series in the late 80s too, where he's switched sides, and him and Storm Shadow and Snake Eyes are very good partners. Believe it or not, in the original cartoon, these two did not really have as much rivalry as they originally do. Believe it or not, Storm Shadow had more of a fight actually with Scarlett too. Actually, in the original animated episode Prisoners of Cobra, Storm Shadow and several members of the Crimson Guard, which we'll talk about a little bit here with the Destro issue, actually attacked Scarlett's family, and actually all but Storm Shadow were defeated, and they actually had captured her family and enslaved them to fight against Scarlett. What fantastic storyline I hope to talk about in a little one too. But that's actually Storm Shadow. He's a very, very complex character. I've really liked the character of him because he's like that classic ninja assault. But I do like the fact he was set up wrong because of jealousy and stuff of Snake Eyes and other things. And of course, when the Hard Master was killed, he thought it was on that area, and of course he joined Cobra, when the truth was he was actually tricked for them to be absorbed into the area. And of course, as you know, the clan splits. So this is really cool continuity that Kelly Thompson is really doing too, and on that too. So let's get into actually what are the pros of this part of the story. So number one, I really like the pacing of this story. Believe it or not, the first couple of pages are really set up as Scarlett infiltrates Mako, gets onto her swimsuit, and gets into her nightgown and everything else. I really like the point because you really kind of get into her head about her being this kind of covert operative, and I really, really enjoyed with the part two. So there's a lot of great introduction of characters. I love the piece between Jinx and Scarlett's history of them being friends, roommates, the actual origin of their codes, and so forth. So it's really, really cool. And of course, the cameos are fantastic in here. I mean, like I said, Stalker is one of my favorite G.I. Joe characters on the regular G.I. side, not Cobra members. I really like the use of Snow Job and how they connected that all together here. And the ending cliffhanger is great because, like I said, she gets in and breaks into the clan, gets knocked out by Storm Shadow, and I really like that little piece. It's really setting up thing. Kelly Thompson really hits this really, really great here. The artwork here by Ferrari is fantastic. I really like it because it gives a wonderful kind of old school feel to it. And it really gives like really kind of a cool action movie, espionage movie, and it's really good. And like I said, the cliffhanger is fantastic with the introduction of Storm Shadow. Those are my pros for it. On the cons, however, there's some things that seem to be a little thing. Actually, in the original thing, when Gorman has, we find out from General Gorman what Scarlett's mission was here, there seems to be a little bit of a problem. She's sent there to find out who the buyers are of all these hostages that basically known for human trafficking and that kind of thing. But like she said, she's fun to find out who the buyers are. She identifies about 3 of them in the area by name. However, things just are starting to go south. Once she realizes that Jinx is there, and the mission's gone south. I mean, it's amazing how much the constantly say, like, that's not your mission. That's not your mission. Yeah, we've been there. We get it. Cliche, and it's not saying, as family members who are in the military, they said themselves, when a mission goes south, you have to adapt to it, and you can't just clear the area and go. So there's some very cliche pieces on that. Also, the fact, believe it or not, despite the pacing, when Scarlett breaks into the clan's temple, she beats everybody easy. I get this as a comic book. I get this as Shannon O'Hara, Scarlett, G.I. Joe. I grew up watching the cartoon. I was 5 years old when the cartoon officially had kicked off in the toy line a year before that. I was really into all the series, but I think how she gets into the temple is a little too easy. I think she takes out one, even though she tells the hard master, oh, hey, I'm offering you my services. And look, I just kicked everybody's butts and basically got here in front of everybody. And it's a little too easy. And I get it. There's only so much they can do with the issues and so forth. But it was kind of a part where I thought that was a little too much. But however, I really did think that they did a wonderful job on it. I think Kelly Thompson really hit the marks on this. The artwork was fantastic. So I'm really, really looking forward. So what can I say for this issue? Well, really simple, everybody. Yo, Joe, this gets an A-. Here is my, people who can't see this on the audio version of this, I have my perler bead of the current G.I. Joe logo here, everything else too. So this gets a piece. This is an A- story here. I really enjoyed that. If anybody is in the chat right now to do anything, we are going to do a Q&A at the end of these reviews here. But if anybody has anything they want to say with their pros or cons or their grades for this issue, if you read it, please go ahead and share those right now. I get myself ready for our Destro review. So if anybody's got any comments, I'd love to hear them right now. I got 2 people viewing right now. I got 5 on Facebook. Hey, yeah, we're almost up to 10 viewers. We're kind of working here. So if anybody has got anything I would like to see, go ahead and post those right now. I'm not seeing anybody. Oh, I got a message there. And I'm gonna bet that we just move on to Destro. Well, I will be more than happy to do that. So moving on to that, let's go ahead and head over to, of course, Destro #1. And this, of course, is written by Dan Water and Andrei Bressan with artwork. It was released last Wednesday, June 19th. It was really good. By the way, if anybody's wondering, in 2 weeks, basically a week from this Wednesday, this is recorded on June 25th, 2024. Next week actually is Scarlett #2. I will be reviewing Scarlett 2 and Destro 2 right there. At the end of the month, I like to try to keep these together to keep these review shows going. It also keeps my sanity going a little bit. So why don't we get on to Destro #1? That's right, everybody. It's time for, of course, our favorite call, Cobra! So how does Destro #1 end? Well, in the Republic of Dark Lona, which actually connections to Destro over here, they are facing a rebellion and protesters. Basically, an insurgency for the prime minister of the area. He's basically been, of course, doing like any other dictators like to do, like the, of course, cash off and everything on the people and everything else. And of course, they have these other insurgents. But he's like, hey, you know what? Just send the arm at them, a couple shots here and there, and we'll move on. Well, there's just one little problem. They, of course, get attacked by the new bats, which, if you read the Cobra Commander series, at the end of the series, spoilers, by the way, Cobra Commander gave a vial of Energon for his Destro's new battle android troopers, better known as bats. So, of course, showed up in season 2 in the season premiere of Rise, Serpentor Rise, in the animated series. Well, these things do not stop. They basically are heat signature, and anything that has a face, as Destro says, actually they will attack and, of course, eliminate. So basically, the bats pretty much just plow through the military for the prime minister, and he ends up winning. They even say Dark Lona is free. Unfortunately, the bats, early in their programs right now, shoot anything, like he said, that has a face. So unfortunately, several of the protesters and the rebellion actually get knocked out. So Destro, of course, turns them off, and then, of course, resets those with his Destro's army, which I thought was a really cool piece, and storms the area of it. And basically, the prime minister, he has toned the run, and basically the reason why he's doing this is because, like I said, you stop working when you try to turn a profit for the people suffering. So as a result, Destro is going to put his nephew in, his cousin, Artum Darklone, and I will talk about him in a little bit, in charge. So as a result of that, the Prime Minister actually says, you know, I will see you in hell, Destro, and commits suicide. As a result, of course, the news gets hit hard about how the conflict was lost, and now the Darklone is under a new one thing. Our good old buddy, Cobra Commander, of course, tells Destro in one of my favorite lines. This is right out of G.I. Joe episode 1. Destro, I am very displeased. I don't know if I'm doing any justice to Larry Custon there as the voice of Cobra Commander, but basically he tells him, like, hey, I gave you the Energon to help your stuff, not for you to run little Perry backward nations, which of course Destro says, hey, this was my business, and you know what? I own and operate Mars. I am only you are not a subordinate. I am your superior. You know what? So guess what? I will do what I am. Thank you for the Energon. I'll keep working with the military units for you, Cobra Commander. And basically, you know, in the classic, Destro basically cuts him off. And we go over a little later on. We find out, actually, because of this rebellion that happened, I'm going to skip ahead a little bit here, too, as we get our introduction of course, the Crimson Guard twins. That's right, Tomax and Zaymart. I actually had those toys, really cool here. But actually, in Sierra Granado, South America, they actually are dealing with this issue there, too. They actually had a revolutionary military officer who was supposed to work against another type of insurgent, and basically, he basically got up and ran because he said he cared more about his men, and the basically the twins tell him, like, you could have still won, you would have lost 20%, but you would have been fine. It's a good loss. And he's like, hey, I'm sorry, how can you be that cold blooded? He's like, well, just to teach you a lesson there, we're going to go ahead and actually show you that 20%. And they actually order their Crimson Guard to actually assassinate 20% of his area, basically saying, you know, this is decimation, which is Roman. And then of course they assassinate, of course, the officer in charge, which was the field commander and everything. But they basically say, you know, it was pretty good, but you know, this was an opportunity we couldn't pass off. We'll find out what Destro is doing later. Meanwhile, during all this, we actually find this is actually a fantastic little piece. I'll talk about this in my pros and cons here with Destro. He goes to actually an unsecured location in the Scottish Highlands, because, you know, Destro is Scottish, believe it or not. And he actually talks to a monolith of his ancestors and talking about, you know, what he's done, and basically the gift of Energon and how his bats are working and how it's unlocking secrets and things not even thought about 10 years ago, how much it's done. And of course, as a result, he says he needs help from an ancestor because now he's partnering with Cobra Commander to have this work, and he really needs some help on it. So he goes ahead and enters the sanctuary here. Meanwhile, of course, a little time later, of course, our cousin, Arkham, is actually welcoming all the different arms dealers to, of course, talk about the different areas too. We got some really cool things. We got just a HISS tank in the back. See some of Destro's Army air things on the area, but basically they're talking about seeing the different areas about the Mars for the Bastions from Hybrid Industries, which is a different company. And of course, Destro introducing and talking to everybody. And of course, they asked about, hey, I heard you got operations of android troopers. And he's like, hey, you know, I don't know what you heard, but that was not quite the part of here right now. As far as he's aware, these things don't exist yet, because it's true. I mean, he has not worked the bugs out of them. He got the bats working, and that's it. However, you know, of course, you know, he's front man, of course, tells them that the twins are not there, and they don't even have a time to do that, because all of a sudden they actually get attacked by stealth drones, which are very areas. They're basically on thing who attack them and everything else. And of course, Destro actually under attack actually sends out his airfoil guards to, of course, find this. He ends up saving, of course, one of the hybrid things, Astoria, who is, of course, the hybrid person that was introduced, thinking of buying and joining things in the Mars program, and also find out about some of his arms. And of course, finds out after he saves her, believe it or not, it's a dud. Basically, it was to give him an attention that, believe it or not, despite what he's done, he is now at war with somebody. And it's really, really cool. And that's actually where issue 1 ends for Destro #1. So let's get into who's who of the cameos. Well, first of all, of course, are the twins and, of course, the Crimson Guard, which are currently big little fairs at my thing. So Tomax and Zaymart, who, of course, the owners and leasons, of course, the extensive enterprise, who actually in the cartoon and in the comics actually dealt with the financial and pieces, and of course the accounting parts of Cobra and everything. Here they're introduced, of course, to the fact that they are basically different areas. About, of course, their company deals with mercenaries and arms of peace and arm, and then of course their Crimson Guards are, of course, their respective corporate areas, which of course are highly trained people. Some of these all these Crimson Guard members are not only trained soldiers, but they also are set to infiltrate everything in espionage. So it's kind of cool to see him kind of in this. It's really nice too. And of course, there's a really nice little area too. Of course, the fact that they're mirror twins, so they are kind of finishing each other's sentences off. I really like the point of this. Believe it or not, I hear the voice of both Michael Bell and Corey Burton, who did the voice of them in the cartoon, really well. They were introduced in season 2 of Period of Darkness. They were supposed to be a major villain for season 3 of G.I. Joe, but they kind of went away after the G.I. Joe movie went out too. So who is this new cousin of Destro? Well, we do know from Destro's family, because I'm doing different arms area, they have a large family. They're kind of cursed. After Destro's real name is Destro Lariardo the 24th. He's the original descendant of the person that was cursed to wear the Iron Mask, which is really cool because of arms area. That's been huge amounts in the areas of G.I. Joe for a very, very long. So it is actually a new character. I double checked anything. He has probably been talked about in the original comics by Larry Hama, as well as the G.I. Joe cartoon, but this is the first time we're actually meeting Darklone. So it's really kind of cool. He definitely comes off, like I said, as a family member. He is a really interesting character. I kind of like the slow introduction of him, and of course how he kind of makes his presence known too. So what worked in the pros of this? First of all, this has much better pacing. I felt it was better pacing than Scarlett #1. I mean, no offense, but Scarlett was kind of like we were at the thing, then we were at the home, and next thing you know, we're at the clan. Here, I felt like there was a good setup. I mean, like I said, it can actually continue as what happened at the end of Cobra Commander #5, with the Energon being handed to Destro and him putting the bats together. So the introductions are really good. I love the fact we get Destro's army. Something people don't seem to understand in the original thing is Destro was his own person. He had his own men, his own weapons company. That's what Mars is. Mobile Armor Resources, what they stand for. So believe it or not, he was always the financial weapons backer of Cobra. So I really like this. Of course, the pacing, the appearance by Cobra Commander was just spot on. Like I said, I heard the voice. It was also a nice nod to the very first episode of G.I. Joe, American Hero, the Mass Effect, because he said that Destro, when Destro shows up late, he says, Destro, I'm very disappointed in you. It is so good. And I just love the fact that how Destro kind of tells like, hey, you're not my leader. We're kind of a little bit of our own people. We're not really even equals. I'll do my thing. You do your things. I'll talk to you later. It works really, really well. And I really like what Walters got with the character. I mean, it was Destro. It was beautifully Destro. Cons on this. There's some backgrounds. We wanted a little bit more when Destro shows up in the southern hemisphere of the Scotland with his family's moniker. We really wanted to go. I get this is issue 1 of 5. I know we'll get back into what he was doing with the Energon, exactly who his ancestors were. But I really would have liked a little bit more background of why he got into Bologna on everything, of why he felt this was so needed, even though he has roots in Scotland, not in this part of Europe. So that was very interesting. The timeline's also confusing because we're kind of the issue starts off with the revolution and the bats coming in. Then we kind of fly kind of back. Basically, we find about Cobra Commander, but then we kind of fly back like a week, and then we end up finding out of course, Hybrid Enterprises, all the invites from Astoria and everything else for the different companies that come to Destro thing. And then we kind of go back to the Scotland areas where we have that little flashback with the Energon and Destro doing the talk with the statues of ancestors, and then we're couple weeks later again, and then we're in this area here about the different arms dealer, and then we kind of go back to the twins and the Crimson Guard. Well, we don't know that's going on at the same time in the park, and then we're them talking about like, hey, just because we missed it, that was good too. Also, I think it's very interesting how the Mars and Cobra kind of work here. We still don't really know the full connection of how Cobra Commander really got in touch with Destro. I'm hoping that's coming soon in the next couple issues, but we're kind of seeing how Cobra Commander is, of course, building his Cobra army out of Cobra. That's all been established, just like in the movie. And I'll be doing a review for Cobra Commander and Duke #1 here in a couple weeks. But there's a kind of little areas we don't quite know how they mesh. In the original cartoon, it was already established that they had the partnership and that was moving on. But Destro's, all the vehicles and stuff was him, and all the crazy science was, of course, from Cobra Commander. And then in the comics, there was a more separation about the origins. There was no Cobra Law in that too, but Destro, of course, in the Mars program was always part of that, his company. But I do like, because Destro's army didn't come to much later in the comic series, as well as season 3 of the cartoon. So we're kind of seeing a very interesting thing between Destro's army. Where does Mars lie? And then how does Cobra actually fit into it? So we don't quite know that yet. Hopefully we're going to get that soon. I mean, like I said, this is issue 1. There's a little things off here, but I feel like there's a lot more engagement in here. And despite the timelines and some of the background we wanted to know in here, it works pretty good. So honestly, the only thing I can say with this one here is, good old Yo Joe, I'm going to give it a solid A. I thought the artwork, the pacing worked better. I love the cliffhanger with the fights and the different everything. I think it works really good for that. So I am very happy with this. So it gets a grade just above Scarlett #1 with an A. I really, really like this. So I thought it was well done. I'm glad everybody did this too, but I really enjoyed the series on this. So on that note and everything, everybody, I am going to, of course, open up to the next part here. And let's get into the question section here of what this is here. So I kind of go into the questions that I have as a reader wondering about this with the new Energon Universe and Skybound Image Comics. So we're going to start right now with the first one, which is Scarlett. So her real name was Shanna O'Hara. She was a member of G.I. Joe and is known for her expertise in martial art and her skills of intelligent offers. Both in the comics and in the cartoon, it was introduced that she was from a large family. Her father was the dojo sensei. He was a trained military officer himself. Hugely skilled and everything. She basically learned everything from her father, and of course moved on to the military later on too. So my question is, how much is that still intact here in this series? Are we going to see in the next couple issues, especially as we get the talk between Scarlett and Jinx's background as roommates, like her entering the military, how she became a espionage agent for everything? So Kelly Thompson herself said she was really going to treat this as a story, like I said, of a cool spy story, which I really do like. So my questions come in is, how much of the original continuity is going to be in the new Energon universe? Because they're going to allow us and kind of put into a new reader friendly, which I love. I mean, honestly, especially when she gets her crossbow for the first time at the sex trafficking auction, and how she saves Jinx. I really like that, as well as Jinx pulling out her classic katana sword and showing her tattoos, which were established a long time ago in both the comics and the cartoon. So the question is, how much of that continuity is intact? Really, how did her and Jinx meet? And even more here, of course, the big question is, what led Scarlett to actually being at kind of peace? Because one thing that's explained when she talks with General Gorman, he says, your contract's up, I don't need it. Some people don't know that certain people who are espionage units in the military, and this is actually known facts. I mean, I'm sure there's more out there. I'm not going to claiming I'm some expert on that too, but they are different assignments that have certain time based on those assignments. So it's very interesting to see where Scarlett got assigned to the Gorman to be this espionage area for this. She picked these ones, she wanted it specifically, or she kind of got thrown in here. And I think that was a really kind of cool questions we have. So going into the next issue, these questions I have. Anybody who's watching this, we've got 15 people now all together between Facebook and YouTube. If anybody has any questions they have about this issue, you want to throw those out in the comments, go ahead and I'll share and answer them right now. I'll give everybody a few. Hydration is good. I am not seeing anyone here. So what's going on? Let's head over to question number 2. So question number 2, I have, of course, goes back to Destro, is the Crimson Guard, as they know, known as the CGs. Originally, the Crimson Guard, like I said, was an organization of G.I. Joe, which are more of the higher elites. They're trained officers. They're under officers. Later on in season 3, of course, they became known as the Crimson Guard Immortals. Why this change happened, I don't know. The comics, they were just saying we're a new brand here. So I got a lot of interesting. They weren't introduced until until Cobra Revenge, the second G.I. Joe cartoon movie. So we didn't see them. So I'm really wondering how these train, because here where the Tomax and Zaymart send them, they seem to just be regular soldiers. We don't see any of those elite standards too. So my question is, how much of the Crimson Guard are that? Are they just elite soldiers that Tomax and Zaymart have trained themselves? Are they definitely operatives for the areas? I mean, they're keeping the red here. They are not part of Cobra yet. We know that there is no Cobra logos in silver or gold here, which separated the different types of troops in them. So right now they're just the Crimson Guard. As we probably know, Tomax and Zimmer aren't even part of Cobra. So this is all before. Remember, we're seeing the origins of these characters in the Energon universe. So we're not really seeing that here. So questions is, are these just elite soldiers that Tomax and Zamar have trained, that that's basically they keep sending them, just kind of do the original stories of the comics where they basically train them, set them on their goers and go do a different area. Also, my question is how much Tomax and Zamar are actually involved in the arms race of different armies, because the truth is we don't quite get if they're the good guys or the bad guys. Well, we know they're the bad guys. Come on, this is the Crimson Guard twins. We know they're the bad guys, but we don't know if they're trying to play both sides. I mean, Destro has his little areas too where it's personal, but he always worries about that. So I think the questions we got to wonder is like, where does the Crimson Guard really fit in this, and how's that eventually going to seek in them joining Cobra? Question 3, goes back to Destro too. He is an arms dealer. He always has been an arms dealer. That's always been the character. He's basically, he serves at factions. He's very fluent of power struggles. He was always a tactician operations in Cobra. He was a scientist himself and an inventor and a designer. And he always had conflicts with Cobra Commander. So we're already seeing that in this series here. I mean, Destro was introduced at the end of the Cobra Commander miniseries. And of course, we got the little pieces there, but we don't know too much about what is Destro. There's a lot of background here. When he goes to talk to his ancestors there in Scotland, I mean, that's a big, what is this? Also, the fact that when he's talking about the bats and everything in the original series, both the comics and in the cartoon, Dr. Mindbender, along with the help of Destro and of course Scrap Iron, designed bats, the Battle Android Troopers, and they had their different generation. There were different versions. I do like the fact that Destro says they're still working the kinks out. Originally, bats kind of knew who were the good guys or the bad guys, and they were unstoppable. We still see that unstoppable. I mean, the army is attacking them, they're shooting them, they're blowing them up, and they're still coming. So the bats are there. But I think it's really interesting where the designs are. Is this going to lead to us finding out more of the Mars program, seeing Dr. Mindbender as well as Scrap Iron, maybe the Grenadiers, since we see Destro's army in here? I'm really wondering if we're going to start seeing people like Metalhead or the Grenadier Ardors, or if Scrap Iron is part of that. So that's an interesting question going to the next issue we have there. And of course, my last question goes to my favorite, Jinx. So Kim Ashaz, like I said, highly skilled military. She was just training, was part of the clan. She originally actually learned under the Blind Master, not the Hard Master. As the comic actually does, Kelly Thompson really parts the point that she basically infiltrated the clan, even though she has the family name to it. And of course, Storm Shadow is involved in this. So I'm really kind of wondering where they're going to kind of go with this with Jinx, because I mean, it's very interesting because Walker says at the beginning of the story she was supposed to infiltrate the clan and then she disappeared. They thought she was dead. And then here Scarlett sees her, and she won't give away that she saw it, but of course the mission is recorded, the parts of everything help, of course, the parts, which is why Stalker comes to talk to her, and of course gets Snowjob involved in it too, because he knew them both from some past missions together. So there's really interesting, where does Jinx lie, because she basically knows Scarlett's following her. She tells her not to follow her, but she comes to find her. So I think it's really interesting to like what's going to happen here. I think the relationship between Jinx and Scarlett is a very open area that's really never been explored in the past with the character. So I'm kind of liking this little doing it. They were roommates, they were friends, they made their own code together, and now it's gone from a rescue mission to what happened. Why did she go off the grid? Why did she go? Is she really part of the clan, or something else happened? And the introduction of Storm Shadow at the end, I think it really leaves a lot of interesting questions here. So those are actually my top questions for this. So I am really looking at this. These were both great books. They both get A's from me. I really, really enjoyed them. There's not much else I can say about that. I mean, I thought they were really, really good series and everything. So, you know, it's definitely something I am looking forward to with the books. And of course, I am hoping to do a little bit more with them. So I think that was really, really good here. I really enjoyed them. And I thought they were a great, great little piece on that. So I really, really enjoyed both books. Like I said, weren't perfect, mind you. They have their holes in it. I know other people have probably disagreed with me on that too, but I think they were really good. And I really want to give a big shout out here because these are winning books here. So you know what? It's time for the air horn. Because that was really well done. I really enjoyed them all. And I really I'm looking forward to what the rest of the series are. There are 4 issues left. Like I said, Scarlett comes out a time of recording a week from there. Destro will be out a couple weeks later here. I mean, these series are, of course, set to end. Let's see there. 4 prime. So these don't come to an end until October here. So I'm really good here, and nothing else has been really kind of a flancing. But I really liked both really great books here. So with that said, if anybody wants to share their thoughts or comments on it, you can go ahead and share those right now. In the meantime, there you, of course, can check us out here. Remember, I am on social media. You can find me on Blue Sky at Ryan7Reed, is on Mastodon. You can find me on Instagram and Threads at Herc78. And, of course, you can go ahead and subscribe to the channel here at Ryan3178. Or you, of course, can join our Patreon. And speaking of the Patreon, which I want to talk a little bit about that too, which I'm going to do right now here. So Patreon, this is brand new. I've been working with this for quite a bit. So I set the Patreon, as you know, I am an educator as well as a comic reader. So I've decided to set up as tutorials and pieces on this. So the Patreon is set up for modules and areas. We have a lot of rewards here that you can get. We have bronze, silver, gold, ruby, and of course, free services. Free services will get you alerts as well as messages. We'll have our store set pretty soon here. There'll be some merchandise. I just got my stickers set up and everything. So you'll be able to order stickers. I intend to have some shirts and hats up there pretty soon too, and some other rewards as time goes on. Patreons always start out slow. I don't expect to have like 500 memberships here anytime soon. Yes, it can be used for monitoring because as you said, for the pay bills here, I have to keep my equipment going and of course do the service here to keep this going. This is actually what I am doing right now. I'm in the middle of switching jobs right now. So this is actually things for the tutorials to help here, but it's something that I really love doing the fact in here. So I'm so glad people have come on here who are already trying to join the Patreon. Thank you so much for those who've gone here too. So I don't have much more else to say here. I see people are heading out here. Thanks for joining us here on the first episode of Reads here. Of course, look for us here. We're going to have another episode here in a couple of weeks here. I will, of course, be reviewing in a couple weeks here. Duke and Cobra Commander series is here. I just received the trade paperbacks here. I'll be reviewing these all in unison here too. Once I get done reading, we'll be reading Duke this week. Cobra Commander has been delayed over a week, so I'm hoping to have that read over 4th of July. But I do have a couple other ones coming up here. I am going to be doing the Transformers on use. And then moving on to some other areas. Also, if people have checked out my shorts, I have some areas about airing things, including action figure reviews, things with Canva, as well as upcoming other reviews for that. So I like to thank everybody who encouraged me to get Reads back up and running for the live stream, as well as this new on this. So definitely think about liking, sharing, and hitting that notification, and of course liking pieces too. If you join the Patreon, you do have a higher level words. You could join me for a guest on this too, and believe it or not, I actually have some guest panelists that will be coming on here in the end of July. So I want to thank everybody for the very first episode. This has been a fantastic time. I hope you all have a fantastic rest of your day, and I will talk to everyone later.
Body overwhelming melancholy. What will it take for me to fight some color? My life looks like an outfit.